All right, guys. So before we get started on today's show, we just want to thank our sponsor, Chexi. Chexi is a all-in-compass wallet where you can pay your rent, and it's perfect because you can pay your rent with your credit card. You can get Amex points, Aeroplan points, cash back. So basically what you want to do is go to their website. You can click the first link down below in the description, and you can type in how much rent you pay. You can see what kind of rewards you can get through your credit card and see if it works for you. They're a great sponsor, and it's a great idea as rent is such a big expense for a lot of people. So thank you so much, Chexi, for sponsoring the show. All right, guys, welcome back to the Canadian Real Estate Homefront podcast. We're really excited today. We have our first politician on, Bonnie Crombie. She is running for the Ontario Liberal Party here. We're really excited. We watched a lot of videos and prep before this. There's a lot of debates going on because Doug Ford called an early election. And we did love some of her housing platforms. So yeah, I know there's a lot of political divide in the country right now, but we ask that you be open to what she has to say and just an open conversation so we can all be transparent and just see where it goes. So yeah, Bonnie, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me. And just to be clear that I'm running to be premier.
Premier, sorry.
Yes.
Yeah. Premier of the Liberal Party.
Yeah.
Former mayor of Mississauga. Yeah.
Perfect.
Mother. Yeah. She's got 3 kids, lots going on.
I find that, when, everybody's on screen and you never know the background.
That's right.
right?
Yeah.
So I think that that's important too, to really know you were the mayor of Mississauga for 10 years. You have a long history, and
running a government, right? And before that I was a councillor, and before that I was a member of parliament. But before that I had a 20-year business career. And I think lately I heard somebody label me as a career politician. And I said, no, I'm a business person who decided to come into politics to make the world a better place, to make things better. I have that business background, and because I've run a government, I'm a little bit different than some of the other candidates who've never had to actually manage the finances of a government.
Yeah.
Right, and I think that's super important.
It's good to have a background.
To have both, even
practical experience.
Right, because when we talk about like federal government and balancing the budget and all that.
Yeah.
There's so many business aspects to politics that people aren't even
and that's a really important distinction. Thank you for that, Brooke, because last night I had the opportunity to say that as the mayor of a city, I couldn't run a deficit. So that's my training.
Yeah.
You have to balance your bank book just like people at home have to. You have to put money away for a rainy day and put it into reserves because you might need it later. So the money we generated as revenue, which of course are property taxes and government transfers and grants that we receive, like gas tax is a grant basically. And then the development charges, which we'll talk about because we got rid of those. But those are all the revenues that you collect. It's your revenue stream. And then you make choices about how it will go to serve the most good for people. That's what you're spending, allocated properly, by having the right priorities. So that's how I governed, and that's what I know. And so those are the kinds of principles I would take to being premier. We don't want deficits.
Right.
This government, I don't want to get political, but just a little. They've raised the debt by $100 billion. How do you spend $100 billion? The deficit is out of control.
Yeah.
I'm very fiscally responsible because that's my training. Being a business person first and running a city second, that we weren't allowed to run deficits, and so I don't believe in them.
So when you speak of revenue streams, obviously a big revenue stream is land transfer tax, and it has ballooned.
Yeah.
It's almost like $1 billion business for at least the city of Toronto.
We'd have to make that back up.
Yeah. So we just want to, it seems like an outrageous expense. And on Bonnie's platform, what I read was that for first-time home buyers, you want to get rid of it. And for seniors, which was cool too, because a lot of seniors own these homes with empty bedrooms.
That's right.
By the time they go to do the math on downsizing,
Doesn't
you look at
anymore.
land transfer, you're like, I'll just stay here until.
Just stay here.
Yeah. My neighbor in Oakville, he sleeps on the main floor now, and he's got 4 empty bedrooms upstairs.
Oh, goodness.
Yeah. So.
And he probably doesn't want to get into renting business either.
No, exactly.
Right.
So, they say we need this revenue to pay for things around the city and around the province. What's your plan if you do get rid of those? That revenue stream?
So that's a great question, and it gives me an opportunity to also talk about a new deal for cities, because they become cities, and having been mayor, I know that to be true, reliant on things like land transfer tax. And by the way, Mississauga never had one. City of Toronto did. Land transfer tax and development charges to help pay for growth. But the reality is the budgets weren't designed for a lot of the things that cities have to cope with today. Like, look at what they're coping with. A lot of the downloading from the province, including mental health addiction issues, homeless shelters, so much is that they are required, that property taxpayers required to pay for, that never was intended when cities, town budgets were created. Like, cities and towns were pay for bridges, roads, and sewers, your local arena and the library, but not everything we're used to today. And so when you say lower taxes, of course we want lower taxes, but that means cutting things that people got used to. So how do you give cities more revenue so that they're not reliant on things like land transfer tax and development charges? So we have a plan. And we think that I have the best plan, by the way, because not only do we scrap the land transfer tax for first-time home buyers and seniors, but also not-for-profits, because maybe you're building not-for-profit housing, or maybe you're a religious or charitable group and you're doing really important work. So we have a plan to create a fund called the Better Communities Fund, and we're going to repurpose some money that exists today in the Ontario Building Fund, and we're going to call it the Better Communities Fund, and we're going to use that to help municipalities. So the first brainstorm I had was, cities are too reliant on development charges. Let's start there. How do we eliminate them, right? That will bring the cost of building down, and that will bring down the price of the home at the end of the day.
Right, because
there'll be that market pressure that if we're giving $170,000 back to the developer, that get passed down to the home purchaser, right? But then cities, I knew, to be reliant on that money as a source of revenue. So we're going to make them whole out of the Better Communities Fund. So it won't come from the developer. It won't come from the home purchaser. It'll come from the province, because there's a big fund there right now that was to be used to build housing. It's not being used to build housing.
So you're saying the money's there.
There's a lot of waste. The money is there.
Okay. We're just, that's interesting. We were always of the opinion that it wasn't there.
There is a lot of money there. It's just a question of priorities and what you're spending it on. Like, they increased the debt by $100 billion. I really don't know what they spent it on. Like, for instance, even my healthcare plan is $3 billion to get everyone a family doctor.
Yeah. Say it, but don't dive too deep into that, because I want to go into that later on.
It's the same as the checks, the rebate checks.
Yeah, that just came out. Everyone got $200.
We talked about that a little bit. We didn't see the point of.
Well, and it does. Some people like getting a check, sure.
Yeah.
Everyone does. And that helps this month. What about next month?
Yeah.
We're going to talk a little bit more about that, because I have some more plans on affordability.
I want to still talk about land transfer for a second.
Yeah, let's do it.
Because I work with a lot of first-time buyers, and there exists already the $4,000 credit. So a lot of people don't have land transfer, because usually a first-time buyer is not buying a house over that $700,000-$800,000 house anyways, which equals typically around that $4,000 to $5,000. So they already don't have land transfer for the most part because of that credit.
Yeah.
And then
I think it's less than that, though, actually, Brooke.
It's 13,000, I think, that we were estimating we were saving people
on average,
by eliminating the land transfer. On average, yes.
Because you only get a $4,000 rebate in total, which is not a lot of money in today's market, unfortunately.
Right, but if you're a first-time buyer and you're buying a house or a condo as your first purchase, a $500,000 purchase equals to be about $4,000 anyway, so it kind of negates paying land transfer as a first-time buyer anyways, right? And then I think about seniors, if they were to downsize and not have to pay it, that's a great incentive for them to actually downsize and
to make a move, free up the house.
The issue also is, Brooke, there's not a lot of places for seniors to go. Some they go into a condo, I guess, then they go into a long-term living facility or a care facility. Like, my mom can't go into a townhouse because she has mobility issues.
Yeah.
Right? She's afraid of elevators, so she doesn't want to go into an upper level of a condo.
And the condos right now that we see are tiny. So if a senior is used to a large bungalow, it's tough to get them into a
not even
story house. I mean, I saw my mom trying to take all her belongings with her, all her furniture into her, because they're their prized possessions.
Yeah.
Right?
So not even just seniors going into condos. So what I saw in your video that you put out was that you said, we're not going to just build condos. We're going to build family style homes for people. And this is the issue, is that when we talk about housing starts, what we're building is crap. Let's just say it how it is.
Yeah.
It's these small dog crates in the sky, and it's
Right.
like
Tall
you're
and
not
sprawl.
incentivizing the young person who wants a family to have a family. They almost feel trapped in that condo.
Well,
Yeah.
builders have to do that because of the development charges that have existed, because it's the only way to make
Brooke's
profit.
right.
Sure.
Brooke's right.
Yeah.
That is true. That is true. And the development charges were a disincentive to even build a 3-bedroom condo.
Yeah.
Right? You can do it, and that's why they're building, 750 square feet or less, right? Some of them look
Yes,
like
500
They'd
square
rather
feet.
cut the unit in 2 and
Correct.
sell both for $500K than keep the large unit and sell one for $850.
That's right. So once we remove that, there'll be more incentive to build the larger family style. But it's about providing options for people, right? A choice of homes, because we've got to make homes affordable. And when we used to propose that to the development community, those units just got smaller and smaller, and they call that affordable. But that's not what we're talking about.
Right.
We're speaking about the family size units or family sized housing. And, what are all the alternatives for the seniors as well? I think about seniors because, as you well know, my mom's 89 today.
Yes.
And I'm going to go see her, take her out for dinner later. But I worry about her, and, what were her choices out of her split level home in Etobicoke where she was living. And she's now into a condo, but what are other choices for them? I think about that. Where will we put our seniors when they want to downsize?
Yeah.
Right. No, it's a good question. So you think about the developers and the people that are actually building. So in terms of like public sector and private sector, there's a lot of private developers that have literally, and we had somebody on not too long ago that hands up in the air because they said we can't afford it. So incentivizing the public sector
Yes.
is one idea, but then in terms of private developers, is there any sort of partnership or anything to do with getting those builders back up and actually wanting to
so
do this?
our plan, I hope, will kickstart the industry because it's going to make it a lot cheaper for them to build, right? And a lot cheaper to buy. So you've got immediate savings of, depending where, $100,000 or $170,000 on the development charges. That's huge. And there are a lot of options with surplus land use, partnering up with some of these developers who, will be willing to go into the purpose-built rentals, which is really important, or into the supportive housing. Like that's an area I don't believe in building big government. One of the other parties wants to create a big bureaucracy to build. How I'm not going to do that. I think there's enough willing partners in the development business that will build supportive housing. And some of them are religious charitable groups. I worked with one in Mississauga called Indwell, and they build great supportive housing with wraparound services. But you got to help them.
Right.
I think there needs to be a kind of, because it's always been public and private, but
That's
then,
right.
like, for example, I was thinking not too long ago of building like purpose-built rentals. I was just looking into, and then the idea of even like a land lease kind of thing,
right?
and then incentivizing the land lease and then building purpose-built rentals to increase supply.
That's a great idea too.
And that's where the public and private need to kind of actually work together, because right now you buy land, like the cost of building and buying the land, it just doesn't work for a developer. So it needs to have that kind of crossover, and that's where cities need to work with private developers.
There's some developers who have really figured it out, and there are a lot of good ones out there. I'll point to Daniels, who do try to incorporate a lot of affordable units in their properties as well. And I have to say kudos to them because they've made that work. But we got to go further, right? We've got to go further. And the kind of housing that what I'm talking about right now is the affordable housing that's deeply affordable. So you need to partner up almost with religious groups and maybe do it on the parking lot of some of the religious institutions.
Fair.
Change the zoning so you can allow it.
The zoning has been a massive setback and a buzzword almost for a long time, because the red tape, as everybody calls it, and actually getting permits and rechanging the zoning and all that has been.
There's been a lot of pushback from communities because let's be honest, they chose their town, they chose their street, their house.
They don't want to see a fourplex.
They don't want to see it change, right? And I saw that. I saw that as mayor in every planning committee. But the reality is, and I said this publicly, I was pretty successful bringing jobs into Mississauga, into Ontario. I'll do the same. Now we need to build the housing so your children can continue to live here and work in those jobs.
Exactly.
So let's build the housing. So you have to take a different kind of approach to accepting more density, more intensification than exists today.
That's a very good point. I think that a lot of these older generations who love their neighborhoods, respect to them. But if your kids aren't coming to visit you, what's the whole point of it?
Kids are living 2 hours away.
Or
you
Alberta.
Never see your grandchildren.
What's the point?
Well, isn't that funny you should say that? Because I have 3 kids, 28, 31, and 35. And the oldest and youngest got married and they all want housing, right? They all want, Mom, what are we going to do? We want to start families. And a lot of their friends are saying, you have to leave the province. Some of them are saying you have to go to the U.S. That's not the Ontario I believe in.
Yeah.
I want my grandkids to be raised right here.
Yeah.
I want to see them.
Good.
So yeah, I have to ensure that, we have to send that message that change is okay.
Yeah.
You get used to it, but we want our kids and our grandkids to grow up near us.
I have another question for you, just real quick, because housing is kind of a double-edged sword, right? So a lot of politicians talk about affordable housing. 60% plus people own housing and don't want to see their values decline. Are you of the camp that you don't care? Because for housing to become affordable, the prices truly need to come down.
People need to make more money.
Yeah, which,
one or the other.
Yeah, I think the affordability aspect, it shot up 50% during COVID. Rates went to zero. Everyone became a investor. All these things happen where we borrowed from the future a lot. And we've seen a decline in housing in a lot of these rural areas, but it's still not affordable by any metric. So if we build more houses.
It's a real wage gap issue too, because, when I think about it, my grandparents came here from Poland and my grandfather worked a lot of jobs, but he got a job at the Globe and Mail newspaper as the janitor. And my grandmother sewed piecemeal. And they were able to put enough money aside to put a down payment on a house in Toronto.
Yeah.
Imagine that. Today,
You
can't. So the wage gap is huge. And so, of course, they couldn't afford it either. And so we rented out the rooms. It became a rooming house, and those aren't really legal anymore. Oops. But that's where I grew up until, my mom remarried and we moved to Etobicoke. And we had my dad, who raised me, was a realtor as well. Yeah, industrial commercial real estate for him. And things got better. But, you think about that a janitor and his wife, who were new immigrants, could put enough money aside in just a couple of years to buy a house in Toronto. And I don't think you could do that today.
No.
Even on my salary as a public, as a public servant in government, how many years would it take me to save up enough money just to put down a down payment? So the wage gap is huge too. So it's the price of building, the cost of building that we have to bring down, the price of real estate. But as you say, that's everybody's nest egg too.
Yeah.
It's like we compare to the States, who are a lot of their wealth is built on the stock market, whereas a lot of Canadians' wealth is built on their real estate kind of.
Those were my values growing up. I'm probably yours were too. You make money by investing in real estate.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it'll appreciate.
Everybody has that dream.
Everybody has that dream because everyone's going to want to own their own home. But their kids are losing that dream.
Yeah.
The kids are losing that. And I see it with this is so personal for me because I want my kids to have a house.
So why do you think we're losing this dream? What do you think's driving this issue?
Because the price of homes skyrocketed. It's out of reach for them. And the wages haven't kept up over the decades. This isn't new. It's been happening incrementally. It's one thing to lay blame on different things, but it's a combination. It's a complex issue because yes, we had a lot of newcomers, but yes, real estate escalated, the cost of building escalated, trades, everything's gone up, and all of a sudden there's this imbalance, right, with the price of a home and your wages and what you can afford, and that's why people are leaving and they're going to smaller towns, remoter communities, or leaving the province.
Yeah.
Well, there's always going to be supply and demand issue because we're one of the biggest, like the GTA is the biggest other than Vancouver in Canada. So yeah, when people go to smaller communities, there's less people, which obviously is less demand, which and then keeps supply. And here we always go back to it's been a supply issue in my opinion for a long time.
But it's jobs too. So I think that people moved remotely or moved to the smaller towns when they could work remotely. A lot of that happened during COVID. But now people are starting to come back to work.
Right.
And now it's a tough commute.
Yeah.
And now it's a tough commute, so it doesn't make as much sense. But, I've been to Southwestern Ontario, and they build kind of urban Toronto homes in these great little towns. They have the great little amenities. But, I worry, do we have the jobs there for people if they're told they have to come back into the office?
Peterborough built more 3-bedroom homes than all the city of Toronto last year.
Wow.
Yeah. So.
Well, it's been an abysmal failure. I mean, I was the mayor when this government first came on board, and I got kind of excited when they said we're going to build 1.5 million homes because remember, I have 3 kids. I want them to have
you want them to have
I'm bringing in investment. I'm bringing in companies. I'm bringing jobs. I want those employees and our children to live in my city. But it's been an abysmal failure. Yeah. And there are other provinces that have gotten it right. BC is eating our lunch.
in terms of housing built. It starts. Yeah.
But
Yeah,
70% more. Alberta.
Yeah. Alberta's doing
even
really
in
well too.
Quebec.
Yeah.
So, but we
Yeah.
haven't figured it out here, and I don't understand why. So we thought that the plan we had would really jumpstart housing, building, because it made it more affordable for the developer to build, take the cost down, remove the development charge. That'll reduce the price to the consumer, but yet will make the municipalities whole with the revenue they need through the Better Communities Fund. I thought it was brilliant.
I agree with you in a lot of those aspects. The only, like, if I want to come to my podcast, because I live in Oakville, so when I come to my podcast, I'm like, get
Beautiful
ready.
community you have.
Yes, I love. But get ready, Brooke. I'm going to Toronto because of the highways and the.
Do you take the GO train?
No, I drive, but I'm rarely on time because of it, and so that's what my fear is.
You never know, right? If it's going to be a light day or heavy traffic day, and certainly the construction on the Gardiner has made life kind of crazy.
Yeah, so our
Even
infrastructure,
it takes me an hour and a half.
Yeah, and so that's why I'm nervous for these fourplexes, and a couple of like more developers are going to have incentive to build. Like that's excellent, but to support those people.
I've seen some of those in action in the sixplexes, and I gotta say, the ones I've seen really fit into the neighborhood. They just look like larger homes, and you can barely tell that they're like different units because there are two doorways, and there might be two more units above or below, but they really integrate well. So we'll see. I mean, we were the first city in Mississauga to approve the fourplex as of right. And I said I would do it across the province, and Premier hasn't agreed, but I think he should. I think it's an easy fix. And I've seen some that are really architecturally really beautiful and just look like a larger home.
Yeah. Yeah. Amazing. Do you have any more housing questions?
I think we covered
a little bit of
most
land transfer tax.
Land transfer, just building.
I know that you wanted to also,
and affordability.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The one thing that obviously affects me is capping rents.
Yeah. Talk about rents. Yeah.
Just because we've seen the rental market change dramatically, and it was skyrocketed. Now it's come down, and so right now, currently, anything built after I think 2019,
2018 November,
is not subject to rent control. So if somebody wants to go in and renovate it and get a higher rent to support the high rates, kind of thing, so you're going to take away.
So the problem is those people are where do they go? Where do they go? So we support phased in rent controls, but it wouldn't kick in until the building was much older. And then, because you do need a stock of affordable buildings.
Yeah.
Right. So I do support that, but the landlord tenant board is another issue.
Oh, sorry. That's what we need to get into.
Yeah, we need to get into that. Yeah.
There are 53,000 cases
That's
outstanding.
insane.
It's absolutely insane. They haven't appointed adjudicators. There's just this huge backlog. And, it's not fair to the tenants who are been subject to rent evictions or demo evictions. But it's not fair to the landlords either.
Yeah.
There are landlords that haven't been paid rent, and they just got to get this resolved. And my understanding too is they got resolutions a lot sooner when they were in person.
When they did it in person,
They did them in person.
They go in the hallway.
Counterintuitive.
Yeah.
It sounds counterintuitive, but when you get people together in a room, they start talking and making deals and saying, okay.
They had the
I'll give you this,
adjudicators come out and they'd be like, hey, would you
They
like,
do it
let's make a deal. Yeah.
It's harder to go in a Zoom call into a separate meeting in a off room in a Zoom call than it is when you see someone in person, eyeball to eyeball.
Yeah.
How do you feel about how the landlord tenant board handles, because if we're going to compare the LTB to how Alberta, for example, handles landlord tenant disputes. So
how do they do it? Because I'm not familiar.
So basically, if the tenant stops paying rent, essentially it's like 30 days and you're gone. Just like if you don't pay your mortgage, right? So
correct.
Power sale.
And I know that you had something that is like a
trigger it.
What did I read about one of your policies that there was, if a tenant was in need, there was some sort of...
Oh, we have an emergency fund. Yes. We have an emergency fund that if they're, fall into hardship because they've lost their job or the, economic circumstances, there would be an emergency fund available. It's a limited term.
I like it though.
Limited term, limited time. However, it would help those in need to avoid those situations because let's be honest, people can't. They have to pay their rent. I mean, this is,
So would it be a loan to the tenant then to pay their landlord? Would it be given to the tenant in hopes that they pay their landlord?
It's emergency funding to pay the rent. It would go to the landlord, right?
Yeah. It's go directly to it. I like that. I think that, we've kind of lost track of taking care of Canadians, which is kind of sad. You've seen it in the homelessness problem. I think it's a good way to pivot into that.
Yeah.
I think there's 80,000 homeless people in
That's right.
Ontario. Yeah, we
That's
see, I mean, I live in Toronto, so I see the tents all the time.
Yeah. But
I know you have addiction in your family, so do I. The
yeah,
number one thing that I know about addiction is they need help. They need someone to believe in them.
thank you.
The amount of money it cost for the person in my family to get help was not possible for a lot of people. So I think that we could solve a lot of this homelessness if we put the money and resources into helping people get treatment. So I'd love to hear what your
Thank
plan
you
for homeless
that.
people.
Thank
'Cause,
you. That's you're
my
you're
God, no
you're
problem.
dead on the money there. You know, I have a lot of compassion for this issue because at the end of the day, these are our sons and daughters. I have a friend who his nephew was a homeless person and very tragically lost his life. He had mental health issues, serious mental.
Yeah.
You know, and my own dad.
Yeah.
He ended his years in the Seton House because of chronic alcoholism, and it's a disease. So, you know, when they talk about moving homeless people and, you know, it's just, we need more compassion, kindness than that, because these are our children. They're somebody's child or parent. And so there needs to be a plan where we're going to put them. We're not going to criminalize people who are homeless. They're not criminals because they have unfortunate economic situations or perhaps they're suffering from mental health issues. They need to get treatment.
Yeah.
But what you just said is so true. I know of people who want treatment, but they're in line and it's going to, in a wait time is a couple of years at the facilities that are provided by the province. And then you could find a private facility, but unless you're of a family that can help you, then how are you going to manage?
Yeah.
So we need more of that availability for people who actually want the treatment. You can't just sweep people up and tell them they need to move on. They're just going to find somewhere else to go. Yeah. And listen, it's not only Toronto. You know, every small town I've toured.
You see it in Hamilton a lot.
Hamilton, oh my gosh, you see it in London, Ontario, Kitchener. Kitchener's done some great things with tiny homes. In London, Ontario, they've built some supportive housing on the property tax dollar rather than on the provincially funded.
Oh, amazing.
You know, there are others who have built modular homes. The mayors are taking responsibility and taking this into their own hands. They get together. I know I used to chair the group and we discuss best practices, who's doing what that works, but it shouldn't be their responsibility.
Yeah.
Mental health and addictions and healthcare generally is provincial responsibility, and it's going down to the property taxpayer and it's increasing your property taxes.
Yeah. Can I ask you this? Would you ever legalize hard drugs like they did in Vancouver? Okay, good.
No,
That's all I want.
No.
No.
That was a bad experiment.
As
We
you
saw
know
very
from
quickly
addiction,
it didn't work.
Yeah.
It didn't work.
You can't
I
give an
don't
addict
believe in that.
access to more
No.
drugs or
No,
alcohol.
they just-
Unfortunately,
yeah.
they need to weaned off of it. But
I
yeah, go
saw
ahead.
in Ancaster they proposed what was it?
Another
These
beautiful
contain-
community, eh?
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah.
The house in Ancaster. So, but a lot of the people from Ancaster, because I know a lot of people, said no, we don't want that. But what the city proposed is, I don't know what they exactly were, like almost. I don't want to say shipping containers, but it
Let's
kind of
call
like
them
that.
Modular homes. Yeah.
It was built out of a very small with
shipping
heating.
containers, yes.
You can add like
Yeah, it's a cheap way to do it. Cheaper way, yeah.
You can actually.
But in the
make
dead
it
of winter, if it solves a
livable
crisis,
for
Let's do
homeless
it.
people.
Yeah.
But they said no. So I wonder where that is. But it's very small. So all you really, you can fit a bed and they would heat them.
Right.
And then I guess there's communal washrooms, but they
Yes.
shut that down because every time I go to Hamilton, it is also decreasing the value of a lot of communities of the real estate just because, they set up tents and it becomes kind of trashed. And
well,
Yeah.
the idea is we need to build supportive housing. And
100%.
I'll be honest with you, I have a project across the street from my house that Indwell built. It has 68 units. It's called Lakeshore Lofts or Lakeview Lofts.
Yeah. I know
Yeah, and
that.
you've seen those blue murals. I live right across the street,
Yeah.
and it's wonderful.
Yeah.
And if they're, hotel room size, tiny units, but they're provided, they have the supports they need. The food bank is downstairs, and they're getting the treatment and the counseling they need. That's what we need. We need
Yeah.
to build. We need to get
100%.
that built.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
That's the solution.
Yeah, I forgot about that. Like
There are 3 of those from Indwell that are being in Mississauga alone, and they're building right across the province. So I use them as an example. They're not the only one. It's the one I'm most familiar with, but people need to be housed.
Yeah.
Yeah, no.
Especially in the winter. It's
well, especially this winter. Look at what we're experiencing right now. It's
Frigid
nuts.
temperatures and
It's crazy.
Yeah. Let's pivot to your healthcare plan because We talk about healthcare on our show a lot.
Cortez doesn't have a family doctor.
I don't. Yeah, I don't. Mine retired.
See, that's what happens.
Yeah, mine retired, and being younger, I know I'm like I should have one. I
Yes.
feel like our healthcare system is not preventative; it's proactive. Because
Reactive.
yeah,
think
it's
it's
reactive.
reactive.
Yeah, sorry, that's the word I meant to say.
When you're sick,
when
you
you're
go to
sick,
this-
you
you go
go
for help.
but then you're dreading it because you got to sit there for 20 hours.
That's why you need a family doctor, because
Mm-hmm.
they monitor you annually. You go in for your physical and they check your blood, and they see that if you're gaining weight or showing signs of diabetes or whatever condition you may have, they're tracking you.
You're right.
You're tracking you, and they can prescribe your meds, and you call back and say, oh, those don't work for me, and they change them. But if you don't have that, what do? Go to a walk-in clinic? You know, people do. They go to the emergency ward of the hospital.
And that's where you have these
And that's
lineups.
why you're both in Oakville. So you had beautiful Oakville, Trafalgar, and wait times of 20 hours
Yeah.
to be seen. You had
To
a
be
beautiful
seen.
hospital that you can't get into, and they have no beds.
So it's 2.5 million people, is it, that don't have a family doctor in Ontario
Yes,
alone?
but another 3 million are at risk because, like you, those doctors
gonna
are aging
retire.
out. They're
Yeah.
hitting retirement age,
So
right?
we need to look at, actually, I think there's also a lot of doctors. And my mom works at Sick Kids, so she's been there for 25 years. She knows a lot of skilled doctors that has
Right.
gone to the States because
They get paid more.
they get paid more.
Yeah.
So that is the key, and you got to compensate them, especially the family doctors, because when they go into the other disciplines, frankly, it's more lucrative for them. And the family doctors have been frozen, I think, since at least 2018, but nothing else has been frozen. Their rent has gone up, the salaries for their nurses and their staff has gone up, everything has gone up. So, and their costs, their equipment, everything is increasing. So what they're taking home is shrinking every year. So of course there's a big disincentive. So number one, we got to pay them better for our family docs. And many of them, 6,000, in fact, have left the profession. We got to incentivize them to come back. Some are practicing in the U.S., so feeling patriotic right now. I want to give a big boost, have a plan to give them a huge incentive, $150,000 to basically will pay your moving expenses back home, come back,
That's
set
good.
up an
Yeah,
office.
that's cool.
To doctors and nurses, because maybe they're just practicing in Detroit, but they live in Windsor, or maybe they're in upstate New York, or wherever they are. Come back home, we want you. And our healthcare system, now that we've got this threat from the United States and this president who wants to wage a trade war and pose tariffs on us, it's one of the things I'm most proud of. When we travel, right, you go to abroad, did you say what makes you different to be Canadians? We have a strong public healthcare system,
Yeah.
right? Don't
Yeah,
we?
it is.
Don't we?
I'd say we
You're
did.
Yeah,
Well, we did.
Did.
That's the
Yeah.
one thing that makes us, but it's eroding.
Yeah,
Right?
it
And
is,
I
it
know
is,
that
yeah.
this government is moving us closer and closer to private medicine. And I know people in the United States that lose their homes once
Because
they
they can't
get
pay their
sick,
bills.
because
Yeah.
they can't pay their medical bills. I don't want that for Canada. So we bring back more doctors, but here, let me tell you a little bit more about it. So building more medical schools is a lot longer term. So let's talk about what's quicker. So number one, you double the residency program. You've heard about maybe your friends, foreign trained doctors that go to the UK or
All
the
the time. I
US,
was going to ask you that.
Poland,
all the time.
Bahamas,
Yeah.
then they can't come back.
Yeah.
They can't get a spot in the hospital because we don't have enough residency programs. So right there, foreign trained doctors, people immediately think it's somewhere overseas. It's our own kids that go to medical school, but we need the other folks too. And then there's so double the residency programs, which are half of where they are anywhere else in BC and Alberta. They've doubled the number of residency
Oh, wow.
positions, right?
Getting in is the
that's
hardest part for a lot of people.
simple,
Yeah.
a simple, quick fix. That's low hanging fruit.
Mm-hmm.
Then there's the mentorship. I call it the mentorship program, but the official name is kind of technical. Practice Ready Ontario. So you bring these foreign trained doctors in. Some of them could be our kids. Some of them from abroad.
We've talked about that before.
Yeah, and they work with doctors to make sure their skills are up to snuff, up to speed here for Ontario standards, right? And we got to get more of them through as well. And then we look at the ones who have gone to other disciplines, and then we look at your doc who retired and say, what if we pay you a little more to stay a little longer until we can get some more young people through medical school?
Yeah.
Can you stay just a little more, maybe some more hours a week? And then the other big incentive for doctors, quite frankly, is they have a huge admin burden. Who knew that they spend half their day doing paperwork?
Wow.
Half
Yeah, I
their
guess
day.
they got to write the patient's
And so
note down.
often you hear your doctor, we're not seeing patients in the afternoon because they're busy doing paperwork. They do over 20 hours a week of just paperwork. And I think they're the only profession that still uses a fax machine.
Oh, wow. Do they actually?
It's actually required to send a prescription to a pharmacy by a fax machine.
That's crazy.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
So we got to get rid of fax.
It's got to be a better
machines.
way.
And the other reason doctors spend a lot of time on the phone trying to set up referrals for their patients. That's a waste of their time when they could be seeing patients.
Right.
Paperwork, seeing patients. So they got something called AI Scribe that they need to be using. They need to work in teams too, so they can share the cost of one admin person. Get rid of the fax machine.
Get rid of the fax machine.
Yeah.
Get rid of the fax.
Yeah, I
machine.
agree.
Can you imagine?
Hilarious.
And a centralized referral system so that all the docs in the area who are specialists
I think AI will help with that.
will help with that. They post their availabilities. If they have open
That's awesome.
appointments, you just look on the referral system. Okay, cardiac specialist, whatever, internal specialist, eye and ears, nose, throat specialist, who's the closest in the area or wherever, who's the soonest appointment. It's a centralized referral system. You don't have to be on the phone calling your former medical colleagues that you went to medical school with about, hey, can you take my patient?
Right.
You just go onto the centralized referral system. Doesn't that make so much more sense?
It does make a
You
lot
know
more
what
sense.
My
Yeah.
doctor does, and I've never heard of another doctor that does this. I text and call him, and I'm like, hey, I need this, or hey, I'm not feeling this way, blah blah blah. And he basically asks me my symptoms, and then
Isn't
script.
that great?
So it's just so much easier. But we've built a rapport, so he's going off.
So
obviously. That's important.
That's important, and that's technically they don't do that, but
Oh,
they've
my
got that
God.
relationship.
You're outing your
That's
doctor.
okay.
Yeah.
Your secret's safe with me
Oh,
and
yeah.
all your viewers.
And all our viewers, yeah.
But they get your OHIP card and it's an appointment,
Mm-hmm.
right? But sort of like telehealth, like online.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's become pretty
which I think
popular.
It's getting more
Yeah.
and more, particularly in the remote communities, right?
Yeah.
Where you don't have so many doctors there. So you go and you book an appointment with a doc online to be seen. And, I've got fever, my child has fever. These are my symptoms. And then maybe they can email over a prescription to a local pharmacy if they
Instead of faxing it.
instead of
Yeah,
faxing
that's
them.
funny.
And you at least give you some advice on an online appointment for remote areas because not everyone has that kind of relationship with their doctor. And I'm glad you do, but it's not the
Right, because just even me thinking about having to go sit there and refill my script, I wouldn't do it just because of the wait time and how busy I am. It doesn't.
And you want to take the money, you're saying that, I think you were talking about the spa.
Oh my gosh.
If you get rid of
Let's
the
talk about that.
if you get rid of the spa, you could afford these healthcare incentives.
So no, actually, the let's call it the pre-election checks. They were $3 billion. That's my plan.
Yeah.
No, but the spa's a good point too. I'm going to
Okay.
get to that. $3 billion in pre-election checks, and we all agree it's nice to get a check, but it helps 1 month, and then what?
Yeah.
So I'll launch into my affordability plan because I'm going to save you $1,150 every year. Okay, but the spa, it's really interesting, and I called the premier out on this in the debate last night, that he actually gave more money to the foreign-owned spa at Ontario Place, $2.1 billion, according to a government watchdog, because we thought it was $2 billion, and it's more than $2 billion, than to his healthcare plan.
Yeah, that's
His
pretty
healthcare
bad.
plan
What
is
spot? I'm sorry to.
There's
be
a-
ignorant,
at
but
Ontario
I don't
Place.
know
You've
what-
seen
Ontario
all
Place?
the
Yeah.
trees have been cut down.
They're making a
They're
Nordic
making
spa.
a spa.
Yeah.
They're creating a spa at Ontario Place, and it's a foreign-owned company that gets to build on public land.
Mhm.
Usually that isn't done. So usually we charge them exorbitant rents because they're on public land. They got a sweetheart deal. And I want to understand why, and I'd like to see it, but it's all been very discreet, and there hasn't been any disclosures about it. It's all very secretive. There's been no transparency, no accountability on this, and they're building a spa at Ontario Place.
So is he thinking that it's going to be revenue for the city? Is that what?
No,
I don't
it's
know.
not for the city.
Oh.
No, it's for the company. It's a privately owned company that got a sweetheart deal.
Someone's got to look into that.
Well, we've been trying. It isn't getting traction, but a spa,
Yeah.
a foreign spa, that money's going abroad. It's owned by a foreign company, Therme Spa, and it's
Therme Spa.
Is
Yeah, they
it
have one.
Therme?
There's one in.
no, it's not. It's different.
It's a different one. Oh, okay.
Different.
Okay.
But a spa on public land.
Yeah,
The money's being, proceeds are.
It's a lot of money.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's other
Profits
places.
are going abroad.
It was kind of like the alcohol deal.
The alcohol deal was really bad too.
Yeah, it cost billions of dollars, and to me, it's like, well, there's just
Another
other things.
$2 billion wasted.
There's
We
other
called
things
it-
we could have.
We called
used
it the
on,
$1 billion booze doggle.
Yeah.
And he said, "Oh, I'm opposed to beer and wine at quarter stores." I said, "No, I'm not. But it's coming
We got bigger
2025 anyways.
problems. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it was coming in 2025.
Yeah.
Right. So why would you spend $2 billion to do it 1 year early? Why?
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah. No, that doesn't make a lot of sense.
I don't have people saying to me, "Hey, Bonnie, you better get beer and wine in the local." I'd like to pick up a 6-pack when I fill up my gas. Nobody said that to me.
No.
You know what they said to me? They said, I need a family doctor.
Yeah. There's more pressing
registering
issues.
New patients. But so they actually, their plan, I think it's 1.8 billion, is less than the money they gave the foreign spa, 2.1 billion.
Wow. Well, we only got about 5 minutes here left. So I wanted to touch upon.
But the affordability stuff, maybe a little bit too. And how
Yeah.
we're going to make life more affordable.
Well, you said something about the tax cuts, which for I know you're the Liberal Party leader.
I'm a different kind of liberal.
You definitely are.
Because I'm a business person and I've run a city and managed a big budget, right? So I get it.
Yeah.
I get it. I'm a different kind
Do you want to touch upon that? So I think it's 75,000 or less.
So let's start with, first of all, small business tax cuts. So if you're running a small business, we're going to cut your taxes in half from 3.2 to 1.6%. 1.6%. That should put about $18,000 back in your pocket, so you can maybe hire somebody.
Okay.
Yeah.
So for the small business threshold,
and we're going to increase the threshold too.
Okay.
So
what's the threshold to be
up to
considered
$600,000 before it kicks in?
Okay, so that's a small business. 600,000 or less, you're a small business. Is that?
Yeah, it was right now it's 500, right?
Right now it's 500. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so we're going to increase.
So then you're a small business in revenue, 600,000 in revenue. You're considered a small business.
I believe so. And then so you're going to get the tax cut. Yep.
Okay.
So that's great, but we're also going to cut income taxes. So on the first $75,000, we're dropping you a whole category from 9 to 7%, so 22% savings. So it'll impact greatly people who are middle income earners,
right?
But everyone gets it on the first 75,000.
First 75, yeah. I was going to say everyone benefits,
right?
Yeah.
And then the other things we're planning to do as well is taking the HST off home heating and hydro. That's between the income tax cut and the home heating and hydro, that's $1,150 back in your pocket a year.
What about the carbon tax? Last question.
There is no carbon tax. There is no carbon tax. And, maybe I was the first Liberal to say publicly there's no carbon tax. And, this government likes to say different things, but they're lies.
Yeah.
They're lies. I've never said anything. Anyways, I'm going to say very clearly to you right here, right now, that there will be no consumer carbon tax on families, on consumers, on farmers. But, there will be a plan that will make polluters pay. They understand they have to, because climate change is real. Just take a look outside. That 100-year storm is coming all the time. Like, how many times have we gotten flooding and big storms? And we need a plan. And we need to bring back the green incentives as well. So there is no carbon tax. And as I said, I'm a different kind of Liberal, and I was the first one to speak openly that we would not do that. And quite frankly, we really only have a carbon tax because he eliminated the plan that was there before, which was cap and trade by the previous government. And the federal government said, if you don't have a climate change plan, you get the carbon tax. So we get the carbon tax because they don't have a plan.
Okay.
Is that right?
Yeah. So it's actually, he's the father of the carbon tax. I have nothing to do with it. I'm not charging it. We will have a plan. It will make large polluters pay.
Awesome. Well,
not consumers.
Bonnie, we appreciate your time so much. I hope you enjoyed the podcast. You're able to elaborate.
Thank you guys. I wish you so much success.
Thank you. Yeah, we wish you success too. And just kudos to you for coming on a podcast.
Let's build houses. Right?
Yeah, let's do it.
But more affordable houses,
Yeah.
so our young people and our seniors can afford them. Newcomers to families, because families aren't going to fit into a 500 square foot condo.
Amazing. Well, we thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
All the best. Take care.
You.
Bye. Thanks, guys.